Hello, everyone. I am going to be reading to you and discussing the Akashic Record. Now, I previously did a video on this, a Zoomcast with live Zoomcast with several people in 2016. But reviewing that, I see, it's long. It has a lot of different people talking. It has things going on, that are making it a little more confusing to listen to it after the fact. And this is such an important topic that I'm going to be redoing it here, just me and you, so that I can really hone in on this material and comment on it. So we're going to begin, and of course the material was written various stages of time back when. Probably this particular article, which collects a lot of different things I have written, was probably written in the early, like 2004 or 5 or something like that. So here we go. Akashic, or Akasha. Akashic is apparently a verb, but I've used the word Akashic as a noun a lot in my work, so I'm not going to go back and change all of that. Is an Eastern term which, according to Thoth, refers to the planetary recorder crystal, or recorder cell, where thoughts, feelings, and occurrences throughout all time in the planet's history are stored as a record of knowledge within the subtle etheric substance of the planet. However, the nature of the Akashic records are much more complex and far-reaching than might be imagined, according to Thoth, whom we also know as Tahuti, who holds the title of being the great Akashic scribe. He tells us that the Akashic, or Akasha, is an etheric, subtle energy region arranged into bands which are concentric shells within and around the earth. These Akashic energy bands, or shells, have a very high resonance with the God source emanating from within the human element. The electromagnetic and gravitational force fields of the planet are the media upon which these energy bands are able to record information, also providing stability to their structure. These energy bands are formed through the interaction of two distinct dynamics, which then form a third that becomes the final qualification for the planetary Akasha, or Akashic records. The first two dynamics are, 1, the divinity within human souls, and 2, the planetary soul. The planetary soul is the living essence of the planet, the heart of Gaia. These two dynamics interact to form the world soul, which the Lemurians called the Sha'Maia. Thus, the world soul is formed via the combined light of the soul's presence within the planetary experience in interaction and combination with the planetary soul. So we all are coming to understand that Gaia has a soul. She's a living creature, obviously, but she's also in soul. There's a much vaster understanding here of what a soul is, and you could almost call it categories of souls, types of souls, and the planetary soul, or a planetary soul, is a higher form of soulic unity. We are part of the planetary soul, but we also have differentiated, I can never say that word, soul components. And those soul components we can call souls if we want as well, and we do call them that. So we have these two fields that are working together in synergy. They're not completely separate by any means, but they have certain separate defining qualities. And then if you go into individual souls, you and I, we have different soul qualities as well. So, it just steps down and steps down. But in the final analysis, it all comes together in a cohesive working unity. So it is the world soul, which is then the basic format for the Akashic records, held in the concentric energy bands previously mentioned. As they vibrate with the dynamic of the world soul, fields of resonance with the God source are created within their parameters. These Akashic energy bands interlink to form three-dimensional geometric patterns. These patterns then comprise the recording crystals, within the recorder cell, or Akashic, or Akasha of Earth. Thoth tells us that the most basic of these patterns is called the Akasha, Akosha, and is actually a single crystal. The Akasha is in the shape of a dodecahedron. Upon each face of the Akasha dodecahedron, the thought forms of the world soul create etheric ripples. The type of thought within these ripples determines where it records its impression upon the crystal and upon which face of the crystal it is to be recorded. Each recording crystal is receptive to receiving the impressions of specific types of thought forms. Just which ones is determined primarily by the degree and quality of the illumination contained within the thought. This is the manner in which the thought forms containing the knowledge, perception, and wisdom, as well as the illusion of the ages of Earth, are cataloged into the library of the recording crystal of the planet. Excuse the page shuffle here. Within the main library of Earth's Akasha, there are two major levels. There are the higher or greater Akasha and the lower or lesser Akashic records. In the lesser Akasha, every thought, feeling, and expression of consciousness expressed upon the earth is recorded and compiled accordingly to the intensity level they find within the souls of earth who produced them. In other words, whatever is continually fed by the power of mind and emotion in humanity builds a field of increasing intensity within the lesser Akasha. So, if you have a thought, oh, that's interesting, I can no longer afford to pay my rent. Well, I have to do something about that. Let's see what I can do. First of all, I'm going to go into deep heart resonance and work from there. Well, if you do that, then your imprint on that particular situation is going to be rather balanced, and it's not going to be so intense. It's going to have a fineness, like fine wine, because it's not a good situation in a way, but you're seeing that everything is divine order, and you're working with the process. And there are variant degrees of that. I'm giving an extreme here. What if you say, oh no, oh, this is the most horrible thing. Oh my God, I'm going to starve. I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be out on the street. Oh my God, I'm totally out of control of this. I'm a victim. This is terrible. And you get all upset. You get angry. You get frustrated. You get into total victim consciousness. What happens? The Akasha says, okay, boy, this is a heavy one. I'm going to really punch that home. I'm going to imprint that deep and heavy, and it's going to have a really yucky vibration connected to it. Fear, 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 anxiety, anxiety. And anybody else that has a relationship to that. Oh, I can't pay my rent either. Oh my God, I'm suddenly feeling all this fear. And you're going to clue in to that vibration. I'm trying to simplify it here for, make it a little more understandable. But the point is, the more people that put fear, anger, frustration, victimhood into the lesser Akasha, the more all of us who have some of that present in our field but are really trying to overcome it and get into the right space when we have something like that happen to us are going to have a harder time doing so, because if we have any of that energy in our space, any at all, the tiniest little bit, it's going to start pinging in to where everybody else has a really awful experience with that or feeling about it, and that's going to feed us. And we're going to get all that lower stuff into our field. The only way we could avoid it is to say, is to have absolutely no fear present. Absolutely not. And that's difficult, okay? So it doesn't mean that we're all doomed if we have a tiny bit of fear to being fearful and that's the end of the story. Not at all. We can work with that. Obviously, we can switch that over. But it's harder to do so. So all of your thoughts and feelings, be aware what you're putting into the lesser Akasha, because you're not only harming yourself, you're making it a lot harder for other people, whatever the subject is that you're dealing with, to deal with it as well, if they have any resonance whatsoever with what you're feeling. Even if you don't know them, you certainly don't have to know them. This is a vast, computer, so to speak. It's going to start registering this and feeding it back to like resonance fields. The good thing about that is when you have positive thoughts, positive feelings that you put into that, it's going to start feeding that into light resonance fields. So somebody who's dealing with the same crisis, or even doesn't have to be the same title, like I can't pay the rent, but something of loss, lack, vulnerability, and they have some fear, but they're also they really know the principles. They're working with heart resonance. They're really trying to get in touch with that energy rather than their fear stuff that's cuddling around them. They're going to have a lot better effort. It's going to be easier for them if they have more people that have already made that impression in the Akashic. It's okay. Don't be fearful. There's no lack here. You just need to roll with the flow. You will be helped. Let's look how we can do this. Bring into positive energy. Build it and it shall come. All of these things. This will be what's feeding them the strongest if that field is stronger in the lesser Akasha. Okay, so back to the text. If I can remember where I left off now. Here we are. Some of the most prevalent consciousness thought forms in the lesser Akasha would be such things as the world's religions, common issues of survival and politics. Many of these records contain accurate and true information. However, they are also liberally intermixed with many illusions that are born of mass belief systems as well. When accessing the lesser Akashic, or Akasha, the individual Akasha investigator's thoughts, feelings, and beliefs will be magnetically attracted to information, true or illusional, that supports their own inner feelings and beliefs. If the Akashic investigator is exceptionally clear mentally and emotionally, and not egotistically attached to their ability to access the information available within the lesser Akasha, they can move amongst the strong currents of lower magnetic energy present and align with the highest truth to be found in the lesser Akasha. Now, this is really addressing people who can do this stuff, like me, presumably. But that doesn't mean that there's just a handful of us. Many people do this. Some of them do it without even realizing they're doing it. Accessing the Akasha in a way, we're all accessing the Akasha. Let me put that first. But I mean in a way that is consciously just seeking information. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Many people do this when they say, I'm going to receive some inspiration, or I receive some inspiration. That they're receiving from the Akasha, but they may have angelic beings or guides or guards helping them to do that. So do I, but they're doing it. However, what this is addressing here is that when you're reading for yourself or someone else, when you're going into the Akasha for someone else or yourself, and you have something specific that you're seeking, like someone comes to you and says, well, I'm really having a problem with anger management, and I'd really like to see in my past lives or in my soul vibration, what's going on there. Why am I having a problem with anger management when I don't seem to have any obvious reason for that I can say, oh, well, I know what that is. They want some help with this. Well, the first thing to do is to intend what you're honing into. You go into a library, there are a lot of different books, and there are a lot of different books on the subject you're looking for. But you want to go to some trusted sources. You don't want to go to the, to the National Enquirer to find what you're looking for, even if they have it referenced. Oh, the National Enquirer has this subject referenced 5 different times, You just go, no, thank you, I'm not going there. You want to go to something good. I'd even pass up Wikipedia. I'd go to, I don't know, Strong's Concordance or something that has some substance. Or maybe, in this case, an aspect of information that comes that feels like it's connected to the great masters of Yogananda or, Kathumi, or I don't know, somebody like that. It's not like you call upon those beings. You could, of course. But you want to set an intention that the level of accuracy, that the quality of the information you are seeking reaches that level of quality, of truthfulness. So that's what you're intending. You're seeking that, and you put out a very strong intended vibration. You don't have to go into an hour of meditation over it. You just say, this is what I'm intending to seek, and you put that out right up front. Then the little librarian of the Akasha in your inner being will seek it out. It will pass by the inquiry. It will even pass by WikiLeaks. Yes, not that too, but it will pass by, the wiki, Wikipedia, and go right straight into the high master realm, and it's going to go in there for your information. So that's what I'm getting at here. Now we're going to talk about the greater Akasha in a moment, but we're just focusing right now on the lesser Akasha. Now, here we go. The greater Akasha does not actually store the thought forms contained in the world soul, those of the planetary consciousness, as does the lesser Akasha. Rather, it alchemically extracts the nectar, the purest knowledge forms from the lesser Akasha, and translates them into highly defined light inscriptions, which are then flamed or inscribed into the heart of each crystal in the greater Akashic field of the recorder crystal. Understand that there is only one recorder cell with two main fields or levels. These light inscriptions then emanate repeating pulses of light language and imaging from the center of the recording crystal, which can be intercepted by a sentient being. In order for a sentient being to read the greater Akashic record, they must first be able to receive this information deep within their own recorder cell. Therefore, the individual is not channeling, as it is commonly understood when working in this level of the Akashic, but summoning an attunement, a vibration between the greater Akashic recording crystal and the planetary Akasha recorder cell, and the prototype recorder cell within their own crystalline DNA spirals. So make sure you understand that. Well, I think it's pretty clear, but so why are we even bothering with the lesser Akasha if we can access this? Well, because it's not that easy to do. And we do it at times. Usually what happens with someone who's talented in a channel, or whatever you want to call it, I call it a source translator because that's what Thoth encourages me to call it, but whatever you want to call it, you're working with both. You're working with both. And some people work more with the lesser because they haven't quite graduated to understanding and intuitively in the inner field with working with the higher. Some people work with the higher and just dabble in the lower when they really kind of need it for, a certain very specific reference not quite attuned with in the higher, So there's various ways these two complement one another and work with one another. You could look at this. If you go back to my material about the white path and the red path being the blood path, the lineage of the world path, and the white path being the path of grace, the higher heavens, the light fields beyond the physical blood attraction that creates families and tribal consciousness and all of that. So you could see the lesser Akashic is being the vibration of the blood path, and the greater Akashic is being the vibration of the white stone or white path. And I'm getting a verification on that. That's absolutely correct. Thoth says that these two can be aligned in that way. Okay, to continue. The information that is contained within the greater Akasha, which the individual has then attuned to, is sent into their brain-mind complex for their own recorder cell to interact with the individual's process of thought formation. Now, I say brain-mind complex, and that's correct, I believe, but also I would actually want to say here, because this was written many years ago, their brain-mind-heart complex, because the heart has a brain, and it's really the most dominant brain. The brain in the mind is the gopher. It's saying, heart says to mind, this is what you need to do about this. And if we're really listening to our heart resonance, that's what happens. When we're not listening to our heart resonance, the mind says, oh my God, and it takes over. That's the one in the head, So anyway, that's what I would put now. So to continue, thus it is through the individual's thought formation process being modulated with this higher level information that some communicable understanding of the knowledge received is effected. Unfortunately, while the information received in this manner is relatively pure, it is also very difficult to comprehend when it is transcribed into the common languages of the earth. This is due to the fact that in this current reality, we have structured our languages to communicate a very limited understanding of the omnipotence we call God and the many aspects and nuances of divine expression. Thus, often another translation factor needs to be, I guess, be applied. Finally, I got that out. Thus, often another translation factor needs to be applied. There are various adjustments that can be made, but in my case, Thoth supplies me with the keys and codes or guidance commands, which I can use as a Rosetta Stone to further translate the information. This is accomplished on the subconscious level, whereby these key codes are placed into my auric field and therefore read by an area in my brain which is responsive to them. The codes are in the form of pictures or pictographs that prompt and orient my language center into a greater comprehension of the knowledge being released from my recorder cell. I have to pause for just a moment here. In addition, Thoth often directly answers my questions. This information flow also comes to my conscious awareness via my recorder cell. In addition, when I need clarification concerning certain types of material, Thoth many times then guides me to other areas of the greater Akasha in which the specific knowledge can be located to give me a larger perspective on the original information that I'm attempting to translate. Since I play an interactive role in decoding the knowledge downloaded into my recorder cell from the greater Akasha, Thoth refers to me as a source translator. Now, I believe that further on in this material, it talks about the Thoth Akasha and how different masters have Akashic little, libraries. It's the same books, okay, but it's just another branch of the library, and it helps them work with beings the individuals, souls that are working with them in incarnation like me, to be able to work with them better. And I think that comes up in this article, but I'm going to state right now, because we're on the topic right here, that I now call it a Thoth streaming, when Thoth isn't specifically speaking to me. Now, this is all my impressions, all my perception of this. That's all I can tell you. But my perception is that there's a Thoth that speaks to me. Even when he does, I still have to translate what he's saying, but it's a more personal feeling. There's the Thoth extreme that I'm calling it now, that I didn't use those words then. It means it's just sort of streaming out of his Akasha library of the greater Akasha and the lesser Akasha. It's like a synapse that brings both of those through to me in a specific way, mostly the greater. But I have access to the lesser through his orientation, which is what I call the Thoth Akasha. So, to continue, this whole procedure for me, or anyone working primarily through direct receipt of the greater Akasha, is not an infallible program, most especially in that the mental personality has to be involved at some level in interpretation of the information so that it may be brought into a pattern suitable for planetary comprehension. And indeed, it needs to be realized that all humans on the planet interact with the lesser Akasha. They contribute to it and receive imprints from it both in dream and waking states that influences their lives. Thus, we have the greater and lesser fields of the Akasha present within the recorder cell of the earth. The lesser Akasha is influenced and greatly controlled by lesser human thought, feeling impressions. The greater Akasha is impersonal and responds only to the essence of truth within the soul. pause for a moment to say also the lesser Akasha is where all the mundane is. Where did I put my car keys? Is it time to pick up the kids from basketball practice? I need to go fix supper because if I don't do it now, I won't have time later, blah, blah. Whatever, you know, comes through those very mundane and yet necessary, orderly situations that we form an order relationship with. See, we're always working in the cloud. You could call the Akasha the cloud. Lesser Akasha cloud 1, greater Akasha cloud 2, and there's a third we'll talk about in a minute. So everything that your mind thinks is constantly interacting with the lesser Akasha, and to a degree, in your prayer state, in your holy moment, whatever, with the greater Akasha. You take the lesser Akasha away, and it is crumbling. It is being dismantled naturally because we're working with moving into a higher state consciousness on the planet. We're being ready to move into the pyramidus radius matrix, which is the bridging format. And then from there, we will go through what is symbolically called the ascension and move into this higher, newer state realm. And in that, there's only the greater Akasha. There's one Akasha for us and not this lesser stuff. So the lesser is breaking up. And this is an important point because we got to get with the program here and really start being more with the greater Akasha. So you say, well, if we don't have a lesser, then how can I find my car keys? And that is because the greater Akasha sends you the impulses, where the holistic field. If you have the impulse from the greater Akasha and the entire holistic field you're operating in, believe me, you will not have to memorize where your car keys are or where you put them last, because everything will be instantly available to you as a source of knowledge. Memory, what we understand is memory, but we won't have that anymore. We won't need it. We will have a holistic field of operative system, a full light field, not a half light. Half light depends upon the lesser Akasha for mundane things and to get things in order, because we don't have the other half of the light, so to speak. Well, we're in full Metatronic accord. We don't need that. Okay, so to continue. Let me see where I was. I'm going to start over on this paragraph here. Thus, we have the greater and lesser fields of the Akasha present within the recorder cell of the earth. The lesser Akasha is influenced and greatly controlled by lesser human thought, feeling, impressions. The greater Akasha is impersonal and responds only to the essence of truth within the soul. Those states that in the case of the higher Akasha, although it does not store thought forms contained in the world soul, it does integrate with, as it extracts the pure essence or nectar from the lesser Akasha. Well, that is true at this point, but what's happening is that it's not even doing that much anymore. It is simply creating a holistic field so that, that we can access it as a holistic field. I shouldn't say creating, it has always been that way. But from our reference point, the greater Akasha, or the higher Akasha, is giving us an integration with that lower field. In other words, it's saying, okay, here's the lower field, but I'm also integrating it, the higher Akasha is saying, into a way that helps you work with that. But that's really only a very small layer that allows a sort of a hookup between the two.
I'm reminding you, exercise.
So, pardon me, that's Alexa speaking. So anyway, what's happening here now is that this lesser Akasha is breaking down, and thus the higher Akasha, the greater Akasha, is bringing us in to the holistic field. But it's not going to bring us in kicking and screaming. You have to cooperate with it. If you don't, you're going to start forgetting where your car keys are a lot. And out of this comes a lot of what Thoth indicates in the future, where people that are just simply not aligning with this higher Akasha. And you don't have to be a guru. You don't have to meditate for hours. It's not that kind of a thing. But you have to be an open heart-centered consciousness. You have to have some semblance of that system. And you don't have to know about my material here. It's not any of that. You just have to be. You have to be in that frequency. The man that rounds up all the homeless dogs and at his expense takes care of them and finds home for them. The person that is over there in war-torn countries at their own life risk trying to feed babies. They don't need to know this stuff. It's interesting to know, and I think it's helpful for those of you who are working within this higher consciousness perspective, that you wish to understand what you're working with better. This is helpful. But Joe Blow out there doesn't have to know any of this. He just has to be in his heart, truly, and take action from that heart center. And he doesn't have to be purpose. How many hours a day does he meditate? Probably none. So that's the point of all of this. Okay. Seems like I'm talking more than I'm reading here, but these things are just, I wrote this a long time ago, and while it's not incorrect, I don't believe, it is not complete by any means in what I know now. Nothing is ever complete, but, from what I know now. So that's why I'm adding it all. Okay. Yet there is another, even greater realm of the Akashic, or the Akasha, which Thoth defines as the Super Akasha. This field is not within the Earth domain, but it is comprised of the Akashic record recording crystals of the universe. It operates similarly to the greater Akasha of the Earth, but it is not integrated with any individual world soul. Instead, it contains the harmonic musical language of the angels, archangels, Elohim, and all the creator lords of the universe. Because the Super Akasha does not interface with the lesser worlds directly, only master souls of Earth can as yet interact with its high-level holographic thought form information. So that lets out you and me. But we don't really need to access this, but it's just telling us that it does exist. And Yeshua, Buddha, beings like this access this very naturally. Okay. Thoth tells us that as a planetary whole, we will integrate our individual recorder cells directly with the Super Akasha once our planet moves through the Mazzaroth, the zodiac, and enters under the command of the Mazzaroth, greater state of universal cosmic being. This will be a gradual, ongoing process, beginning with the Earth's entry into the ascended New Earth star reality, and will complete at the end of that next cycle, which he calls the New Earth star aeon, whatever that is. So he's saying we're going to be able to integrate with our individual recorder cells directly. Let me do that again. Hold on. We will integrate our individual recorder cells directly with the Super Akasha once our planet moves through the muzzle. So what he's saying here is actually that we move from what he calls world state 1 to world state 2, world systems 1 to world systems 2. And when we get into the world systems 2, we will be able to access that, both the Super Akasha. And once we access the Super Akasha, yes, there's a level of our planetary field, or the greater Akasha, we will also be accessing. But the lesser just falls away completely. In fact, it's already beginning to fall away, as I pointed out. Now we come to, ta-da, the records of Thoth. Now that a good understanding of the nature of the Akashic records has been revealed, we can investigate the overlay upon the greater Akasha field called the records of Thoth. As I have stated previously, certain master beings, including Thoth, have their own repositories of knowledge within the greater Akasha. These repositories are actually filters which define the pure extract taken from the lesser Akasha in a specific modality of divine encoding. Thus, the souls who are meant to work with that certain form of encoding can more accurately discern its particular essence within the whole light library represented in the greater Akasha. This is a kind of like flagging or tagging files on a computer hard drive for a particular operation, like when you do a backup to a tape drive. The tagged files form a new database of sorts that can be considered a repository of information which has been created from the existing files on the hard drive. Now, as I'm talking about all this, this is a compilation of material I kind of already knew for the most part by the time I wrote this, some new things a little bit, but I wrote it in like 2003 or 4. Okay, so they didn't have clouds then. You know, the cloud, you store things on the cloud. They didn't have a lot of terminology that I could have applied here as a comparative, which I can now. So I would say more likely this is being tagged in the cloud. You know, this is not even on the hard drive, all of this. So anyway, we go to the next stage. Why is this necessary? Thoth explains to me that this world and all aspects of the universe in which the earth resides are in a process of returning to source. In this process, the many components of this universe are all moving toward the full light spectrum source at different velocities or rates of evolution, so to speak. In order for all these differing aspects of the fallen quote-unquote universe to move in a confluent manner towards source, various levels and modalities of guidance must be inserted into the light program of return issued forth from the divine hierarchy of light. Within this framework, the masters have their service, and in concordance with that service, many develop and maintain their distinct repositories of knowledge within the greater Akasha light library. There are individuals who are ordained to the service of working with these repositories to reinsert the knowledge contained therein into the planetary consciousness aspect of the world soul. This occurs in synergy with other souls who are required as well in order to effectively disseminate and hold that consciousness vibration within the world soul dynamic. The net result of this activity, then, is to help bring some of the various components of this universe, in this case those primarily related to the earth, into synchronization in their evolutionary movement with other aspects of the universe. In other words, the masters are working to help bring the slower aspects of the universe up to the same speed as the faster moving components by accelerating or quickening them via the release of the pure information contained within their specific repository in the greater Akashic. These releases are carefully timed by the hierarchy to assure that the acceleration will serve the greater purpose of synchronization rather than cause further imbalance. From among these master repositories, Thoth informs us that his is somewhat unique in regard to the manner in which it was originally formed and in how it is organized. It is for this reason that the archetype of Thoth, or Tehuti, which bears his name and higher mind impression, is known as the scribe of the gods and the guardian of the Akasha. There are ancient texts that state the living Thoth Hermes is the Greek term, was the author of some 3,000 books. We must understand that this master soul was upon the earth twice where he used the name Thoth. In the first experience, he came to the earth as Thoth Muzurud, a being from Orion who lived 5,783 years on this planet in that embodiment. He returned later in the planet's history as the earth-incarnated Thoth Smith of Afra, who was born in Tibet and lived 300 years. Certainly in all that time, he could have easily written 3,000 books. This is how I imagined it to be until he recently, well, not so recently now, but back actually probably in 1998, 99, 2000, something like that, until he recently informed me that during his 2 consecutive lifetimes as the Thoth on Earth, he actually wrote not one single book of any kind by his own hand or even through dictation. When I then asked him about the emerald tablets, which he was supposed to have written, he replied that these tablets had actually been impressed with an energetic fire coming from his chakras while his body was in a supraluminous state. They therefore contain fire codes, which can actually be translated into a codified text. This is true of several other works, which he inscribed upon gemstone in this manner. However, these are not comprised of actual written information as we would define it, and the gem encodings of Thoth are few in number. In his embodiments, both as Thoth Muzurud and Thoth Racemus, he directly inscribed several thousand books into the greater Akashic via the previously described process. This whole body of work, which Thoth committed to codification and expression through the divine fire, forms the original doctrine or overlay for the records of Thoth. As such, it became his repository of knowledge and wisdom in the greater Akasha. In both the ancient and recent past, there have been source translations by other souls of the Thothic works in his repository. Yet he informs me that they were never placed into the written word through any activity of his own. After his 2 Thoth embodiments on Earth, this soul continued to incarnate into specific key experiences on the planet. All the while he maintained the template of his Thothic form, which he could recreate genetically at will. Actually, there are several. There's Thoth Muzuru, there's Thoth Racemus, there's Thoth Ami. This is the one that's walking around on the planet, sort of like Babaji now. There may be more, but it's all the Thothic vibrations, so, same being in that sense. His soul would then return to this higher genetic vehicle at regular intervals between his other incarnations in the Earth's experience. He's currently in his ultra-genetic Thoth body within the inner Earth realm during the times when he is working in this Thoth form. This being has continued to light inscribe updated information into his Akashic repository, the records of Thoth. Well, since this was written, now he's in his new Earth form, and he likes me to call him Thoth Hara now. And so that being, of course, is also inscribed. And, we have to talk about this somehow on a linear path, because that's what we have. We have these linear minds, and it's hard enough to figure it out as it is. But if you're out of linear form, he's been doing all of these and more forever. It's not like it's new. It's new to me and you because in a linear sense, this is when it enters that linear place mark. This activity not only places Thoth's signature of special spiritual expression and mastery upon the greater Akasha, as have other master beings done with their signature as well, but also inserts these light inscripted codices within the repository itself. These insertions then further enhance and direct the presence and essence of the divine programs contained within the planetary Akashic recorder cell. Thoth also tells us that both Enoch and Melchizedek maintain light inscripted codices in the Akasha. The records of Enoch and Melchizedek are composed of a few specific etheric books which link into other areas of the greater Akasha via specific light encodings. Consequently, the development of knowledge within these repositories is dependent upon the entire field of the greater Akasha. Without these links to other portions of the greater Akasha, the information stored in their repositories cannot be deciphered by human sentience. Thoth's repository is singular in its form and operation in that his many and voluminous light inscripted Akashic texts vibrate within the hologram of the whole greater Akasha, initialized within the very crystals that contain his recordings. In other words, Thoth's repository of knowledge contains all knowledge inherent within the greater Akasha as part of its own form, but yet is not limited to that base of knowledge. In this way, his texts are still a part of the whole synergism of the greater Akasha. But the mountain comes to his repository, rather than the information within the repository having to move outside its own context in order to connect to the whole. This does not infer that Enoch's or Melchizedek's repositories are inferior to those, but that the nature of their work is different. Indeed, it is the nature of Thoth's place in the higher planetary hierarchy that creates the uniqueness of his presence as a master being, an archetype, and a keeper of the records. And so that concludes that particular reading. However, there's more, just a little bit more. This was written around the same time, 2002. It actually has a date on one of the papers I bring in here. So this is talking a little more about the Akasha in regard to, well, you'll see. I'm going to read it to you. So here we go. As a collective, we tend to think of the past as an immutable reality. One cannot change the past. However, according to my Akashic insights and my conversations with the illumined being Thoth, time is a mutable wave of energy that reacts and thus changes in accordance with variations in the anomalies of the timeline. What I am referring to as the timeline is a sequential field of perceptive consensus. While many souls agreeing on a flow of sequencing, this is many souls agreeing on a flow of sequencing and how one's reality is created within that flow. Ironically, in a world that has so much diversity and conflict, we are on this planet together because the majority of souls incarnated here agree on the parameters of the timeline we are jointly creating. We may think of this consensus as one body and one pair of eyes observing a flow or path of energy. It has recently been confirmed by physicists that time can be changed through observing it. In July of 2002, I wrote about an article which I had recently read as it relates to the topic of the mutability of time. I reprint it here. In the article, Quantum Aspects of Life and Health by Gary A. Scott, posted on the HeartMath website, 6/28/2002, the topic of quantum computers is discussed. Mr. Scott begins by writing about consciousness as being the controller of health and well-being. He refers to this as being the quantum aspects of life and health. Whether the bits of matter are particles of waves has long, let me do that again. Whether the bits of matter are particles or waves has long been known to be determined by observation. When we observe it, it becomes something different than when we do not observe it, indicating that we are indeed the creators of our universe. The author then discusses an article in USA Today entitled Quantum Computer. The USA article reveals that scientists are at present working diligently to create an atomic quantum computer, or QC. These QCs would have immense speed, far beyond our current ordinary computers. Such speed would be possible as these quantum computers would have the ability to operate outside of the space-time limitations. Mr. Scott states that a quantum computer would be 1 billion times faster than a Pentium 3 PC. According to Mr. Scott, in his paraphrasing of the USA Today article, quoting here, the quantum computer holds an infinite number of right answers for an infinite number of universes. The computer just gives you the right answer for the universe you happen to be in at the time. So in order to believe in quantum computers, which is a fact since functioning prototypes have already been made, mass consciousness will have to believe in parallel universes. And before I continue, we already have created, now see, this is 2002, we already have created this quantum computers. They're just not available to the public yet, and I've read articles on that. And if you believe about the secret space program and all that, some of it which I feel is accurate, some vastly, there's a lot that I don't feel is. There's a whole nother reason for that, and I'm not going to go into that in this. But that said, I do believe what they say, that the quantum computers are very much in use and have been for quite some time, actually way before 1998 or 2002. So they are out there. Okay. Then there is the process of what quantum computer scientists are calling entanglement. Another page turn here. As Mr. Scott explains it, quote, when two atoms are observed by the same force, they become entangled and remain so even though they might be light years apart. Their spins are all in position at once, but the instant one entangled atom is observed, its spin goes one way. At the same instant, the spin of the other particle locks in the opposite direction, even though they are then light years apart. I'm going to read that again, one more time. When two atoms are observed by the same force, they become entangled and remain so, even though they may be light years apart. Their spins are all in position at once, but the instant one entangled atom is observed, its spin goes away one way. At the same instant, the spin of the other particle locks in the opposite direction, even though they are then light years apart. Unquote. So in essence, quantum computers would be employing this system of relatedness between alternate universes, realities, to compute beyond the normal limitations of time and space. Returning to the topic of observing the timeline, we can see the relationship between the observer and the observed in this context. When we individually or collectively look at any place along the timeline, so it is altered to some extent. If many people observe a point along this line differently, it can become conflicted. Now, this is me talking, not the quantum scientists, but this is what both are saying. And create an interference field of alternative versions of that past event. Actually, there are always unlimited versions in the alternative universes at any point or occurrence along a timeline. But when souls debate that point within the belief of its immutability, so a conflict of energies takes place within this consensual reality of the collective. This can bring multiple effects into the picture for the alternative outcome of cause are attempting, let me do that again, for the alternative outcomes of cause are attempting to come together in the ordained immutability framework that the multiple observers have established as their reality. This confliction will eventually result in the breaking down of dualistic perspectives, either this or that, and bring us into the unified field of full Christic awareness, or what Thoth calls the Atosic universe. Another aspect of the mutability of time, and thus the past, is the movement of all stars toward the center of their galaxies. It has recently been discovered that all, not least those which have been thus far observed by scientists, galaxies have a black hole at their centers, and that far from being ominous, it forms the creative nucleus of the galaxy as a dynamic system in the universe. According to my conversations with Thoth, all existent timelines in a galaxy, of which there could be billions, are affected by the stars being pulled toward the black hole at the center of its galaxy. As our planet processes through its cycles around its sun, so it feeds from the star's light quantum dialogue within the galaxy's black hole. There is a communication ongoing between every star and ground zero, or what Thoth refers to as the cauldron black hole at the center of its galaxy. This communication, or light quantum dialogue, allows the individual stars to adjust to the dynamic field radiating from the cauldron at the center of a series of jumps in time. The jumps, or quantum leaps, of the individual timelines allows all bodies within the reality frames of those timelines to maneuver in accordance with the constantly new programming coming from the center black hole of their galaxy. This is the pure time streaming coming from the unified field of the cosmos. The pure time streaming is that which all timelines access as the trunk of their tree. becoming branches stemming from the one source. So as the sun is in light quantum dialogue with the central black hole, the Earth is feeding these codes into its core. As a result, time bends, warps, expands, and contracts all around and within us, yet most of us are oblivious to this dance. We have our clocks, time zone, day and night, number of days in the year, etc., and we adhere faithfully to them. We have history books with all the facts of the past, which are the mortar that binds us and that tears us apart. Yet all of this is a consensual drama. Certainly it has a purpose. It is part of our sensory output and our ability to create in the universe. Yet there is so much more to the whole cloth of time, reality, and beingness than our linear way of thinking can hope to reveal to us. This is a large topic. I only wish to reveal here a smattering of this perspective as an introduction to better understanding the Akashic record, at least from my Thoth-engendered perspective. When I bring forth information on the past from the Akasha, I am mindful that as I observe it, so it changes. This would be true for anyone in the position of observing the past, present, or future. So what can we trust? What can we know that we know? Who are our savants if what we see is what we have changed it to be? I have no answers to these questions. However, I do believe that humanity will never be happy with the reality that spawns such questions. In order to receive the peace which we so ardently seek, mankind must individually and collectively move beyond the paradigm of dualism and personal preference, i.e., I want it to be this way, before individuals can truly be free to accept the fullness of divinity within them. That concludes the text, and I have quite a bit I want to say about this, though. But before I do, this one little part here must move us beyond the paradigm of dualism and personal preference. I'm speaking of the Earth's dualism because there's a higher dualistic field that we'll be resonating with in the UR star that's so refined and so beautiful. It leaves this in the shade. Dualism is not bad. It's just that ours is really messed up. So that's what I'm referring to here. Now let's go back and look at some of this. If what I'm writing here has any truth to it whatsoever. It is very, very profound. Probably some of the most profound information I've ever brought through. I think you will agree with me on that, provided it is true. So let's look at it for just a moment. So what do we do with this? Do we say, well, screw this? Nothing is true because everything we look at changes. So we can't share any reality with anybody. I'm out of here. One can take that approach, right? But actually, let's not go there. Okay, let's not go there because there's another way of looking at this from my Thothic perspective. So take a deep breath, and here we go. Instead of saying that nothing is true, why don't we say everything is true? Now, if everything is true, all in these different reality zones, we can choose the truth that vibrates, resonates with our core being. Now, maybe your good friend chooses another truth. Now, it could be that they're choosing a truth out of fear, anxiety, pressure, whatever, which means it's an untruth. Or they could be choosing a truth like you that is in resonance with their core being. And yet it's just not quite exactly like yours. It would probably be similar. If you're both resonating from your core truth, the principles, the universal principles will probably be the same. But the information, the detail, maybe the slightly different way of looking at it would be different. So I have come in my position because I am spouting out for over 50 years now all of this information from Maya and Thoth, apparently. Well, I've come to the conclusion on this because I've had it, I've spent years trying to reconcile what I'm doing here. Should I be doing this? I mean, this is, I don't even know if this is true and blah, blah. And my little brain just goes all these different places with it. But I've really come to the conclusion, and this is my heart speak to you, that my intention is good. And I'm sharing this as coming from my experience and my reality, not as God's honest truth in stone. Because now if you look at this and you believe any of this at all in regard to the principle that is being stated here, that is partly at least been proven scientifically, my truth and your truth, two different people, they're Akashic readers. Okay, they could go into the Akasha and start reading away. And they could come out with two seemingly vastly different bits of material here. There are a lot of factors involved. I'm not going to go into detail on all the factors, but I will skim them. One is what we're discussing here, that the observer is slightly changing it. We're both observers, so we both have to be slightly changing it. Not one is changing it, another isn't. No, we're both changing it. But are those changes presenting a resonance that accepts the field as truth? A new creation that becomes solid back into eons of time, because we've just reordered the Akashic in doing so, in that particular resonating field. It doesn't change in maybe somebody else's. That's one way to look at it. But if that were the case, both these channels or readers or whatever, their information might differ slightly, but it would have the same resonation, But what if it doesn't? What if it's really opposed? Well, there's some other factors to consider. One, that the one or both of the readers is wrapped up in some personal stuff, some personal, I want to see it this way, influenced by the person they're reading for of what they want to see, subconsciously, but it's still an influence. Or what their belief system is. They want to tuck it conveniently inside their belief system. Those are factors that can certainly influence a reading or what you receive. But let's just put those secondary influences aside a moment and look at just the one, that regardless of how qualified any of these readers is going to be, unless you're working in the supra-unconscious, Akasha, which none of us are on this planet right now, except some master beings are accessing it, but they're far and few between. Okay. Unless you're doing that, you are having a specific perception of it. Now, if you're a really good Akashic reader, and I'm going to put that, I hate to even say that because it's kind of like, simplifying it, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's hard to talk about this stuff. If you're a really good Akashic reader and you really have separated everything out and you're just, really honing in on it, yes, you're still going to observe it. And if you observe it, you change it. But it might be in these micro little levels that you've changed it. However, that could make some difference in regard to, well, it could, little things. But you have literally created a path that the greater Akasha accepts as a viable path. So now it becomes history or future or whatever. And another Akasha reader could come in and tap what you just put into the Akashic that's been accepted by the authority of the Akashic as a true history or future, whatever. And they can access it and go, oh, okay. And they take it up, And that's okay, because if it resonates enough with the greater Akasha, we're not even talking about the super right now, the greater Akasha, for it to be accepted as a viable path, then it is. But the question is, someone gives you a Akashic reading. Do you resonate with that Akashic reading? Does it really in your core being feel good to you, feel right to you? You don't have to sit there and think, well, they influenced it because they looked at it, so I shouldn't get any Akashic readings because even my own, I can't trust myself because. No, We are co-creators, big time, in everything we do. Do you want an Akashic presentation that allows you to understand yourself in that manner, that allows you to resonate with some of the key points in that matter? Do you feel right about that? Does it really feel good to you? If it does, accept it. It's a gift, and it becomes yours. End of story. Well, not end of story, beginning of story. And of course, there's also the fact that if we're all, those of us who resonate with the divine center of being to some extent, are coming together to create an understanding of our past, present, and future that's beyond the mundane. And as we do that more and more and more, these differentiations will become less and less and less. But we don't want to go close the book. We don't want to back up and say, I can't trust anything. We have to move forward. And we don't move forward by being skeptical of everything either. We have to be discerning. But we need to open to the field of where does our discernment come from? From something somebody told us, from some fear we have, or does it come from our heart frequency? And that is the only guidepost. It really always has been. But we could farm things off to other areas and sort of get by. We can't do that anymore. We have to resonate with that field. And there's also another, Thoth is tapping me on the shoulder here. I know this is getting a longer and longer video, but this is important stuff. Oh, so I say, from my perspective, it's important. So I'm going to keep going a little bit here. He's saying there's also another factor here. When you're talking about, when you're receiving information on universal science, and now we're putting aside translators mistranslating because of their personal feelings or religious beliefs or all of that. We're going to set that aside for a moment. We're talking about this thing where you're accessing universal law through the greater Akasha. There's more likely going to be almost exactly similar, different words maybe. So I shouldn't say exactly, but different wording, different way of approaching it, maybe all of this. But the universal principle is going to come out more than likely clearer. One person may have a bigger picture of the universal principle. Another person may have a smaller picture. And that may make a big difference in somebody's way of, looking at it from the whole perspective. But it's not going to be radically different. That doesn't tend to change so with our observation because it is. However, something like, in a past life, you were this person, you did this and that, that field is constantly shifting a lot through, not only through observation, but through, other factors in the, what does those call it? He says it's almost, he's giving, right now he's telling me, he's saying it's almost a hormonal thing. By that he means there's a fluctuation of rhythms in the whole universal pattern that flashpoints your past lives, your future lives in certain ways and accents them in certain directional forms. I know that sounds very abstract, so it's hard to bring it down to what I'm trying to say here. But they're just flashing everywhere. If you happen to catch a flash, catch a little firebug in your net, there you are, past life. And it's real. It's very real. But the other guy comes out and he says, go to the very same point where you just captured this firefly. He says, there's nothing there. There's no firefly there. Well, it's because he's not there the same moment, time, energy, frequency, space that you were. So that's kind of like I'm trying to help you understand it. But put all of this aside and just say, go forward. Accept what resonates with your heart, and that will be the truth. If you're really resonating with your heart and you're not bringing in your old ideologies and thought forms and religious history and blah, 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 you're not doing that. You're just coming in on your heart resonance. That field, that's going to pick up on what you need to know at the time, who you were in the past, who you are in the future, all of whatever that comes through, what star system you were, this, that, all of those things that relate to you personally. When they come through at a point of resonance and you catch that firefly in your net, That is your firefly. Accept it, embrace it, take it in, light up with it. And so it is. So I think I finally completed this long video. And I know that the more I get into something trying to explain it, the faster I talk. I'm working on that. I'm trying to talk slower, calmer, but I just get, going with all of this because it's coming through and I'm trying to explain it. So I apologize if it was kind of fast, but I'm hopefully you will still have, taken it into your heart and you get something out of this. I really hope so. And thank you for listening.